Hi, welcome to Heal Body, Mind and Spirit. My name is Dermot Farrell and today we're going to talk about gut health and balancing gut health. Now I'm going to divide this into two videos. The first video is an overview and the second video is some strategies and tactics which you can take in order to relieve your gut health issues. So first of all, what is gut health and what can we do about it? Well, gut health, basically your gut, it refers to the gastrointestinal tract, which really begins in your mouth, your esophagus, works its way through the stomach, into the small intestines, the big intestines, into the rectum and out the anus. And the reason why people have issues here is that there's a few things are supposed to take place in order for it to work properly, and often there's disruptions along the way. So for a start, digestion, we tend to think of digestion as in my stomach is digesting food. Well, actually your stomach doesn't really digest food. The only thing that really digests as in absorbing nutrients is actually your small intestine. So when you take food initially into your mouth, the salivary glands release saliva, which is full of enzymes which help break the food down to make it more kind of liquidy. Then it goes down the esophagus into the stomach, where the acid breaks down further and turns into a thing called chyme, C-H-Y-M-E. And chyme is really very liquidy, or a lot more liquidy. Then it goes into small intestines. The small intestines are around about 20 feet or just over 20 feet in length. So they're the small wiggly ones. Plus they have little structures called microvilli. So along, if you imagine that's a tube, on the wall of that tube, if you can look in with a microscope, you'll see these tiny little like ridges. And inside them, it's kind of wiggly, and the idea is surface area. So you got 20 plus feet of length of tube, and then lots of wriggles in the tube, which are there to absorb the food. So the food absorption really takes place in small intestines. Then when the body's had enough of that, what's left over goes to large intestines. In large intestines, it absorbs some water back into the body, but largely it's a big pipe for waste disposal. Then it stores in the rectum and goes out the anus. So predigestion is your stomach and your mouth. Digestion is the small intestines, and evacuation is the large intestine. Okay, so there's some imbalances there, and sometimes it can be genetic. Like a pure celiac will have, for example, a genetic intolerance of gluten. But a lot of people who have gluten intolerances, they're not full-blown celiacs. They've actually, it's not totally genetic. A lot of it is food sensitivity because there's an imbalance in their system. Other things we see, things like stomach acidity problems, ulcers, nausea, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, all sorts of problems. One very common condition that's recently labelled as Leaky Gut Syndrome, whereby the entire gastrointestinal tract doesn't work properly, particularly in the intestines. The permeability, the ability for things to stay in or go out of the intestines is damaged, and toxins, so much toxins in the intestines, and the intestine walls are so damaged that toxins actually go into the bloodstream, and then they cause a lot of other health problems, autoimmune conditions, chronic health problems, psoriasis, and obviously allergic food responses as well. So this is also very common. Now the good news is, unless you've got a physiological damage to the gastrointestinal tract, there's a good chance you can be fully healed, or certainly an awful lot better, more so than most health conditions out there, which is the good news. Now, in order to fix gut health issues, we have to start by asking ourselves, why are we getting gut health issues? Well, like I said, sometimes there's a genetic predisposition there. But also on top of that, we've got lifestyle. People are very sedentary, they're not moving much, blood circulation is low, and they're not as healthy as they should be. Another big factor is stress. People are very stressed these days. And part of this leads into lifestyle, whereby we're doing all the wrong habits, like eating while moving, not chewing our food properly, etc. And a very big factor, of course, is that a lot of food we have today is full of preservatives or denatured. If you go to your local supermarket, at least 80% of the food there is junk. Now the obvious things are chocolate cakes and bars and biscuits and stuff, but also anything that's packaged, like a cereal packet, a tin can, it tends to be junk. But on top of that, even if you go to things like say fish and meat, for example, a lot of chicken these days, they inject it with hormones to make it bigger. They inject cows, so they're full of chemicals. Salmon is often in waters which are full of toxins, although some of the fish are okay, but a lot of it is questionable. And then even if you go to things like fruit and vegetables, Well, a lot of it's been deep frozen. For example, the average apple in the supermarket in America is about 6 months old. So it's actually been put in deep freeze. And this even applies to organic. You might buy something that's organic, but it's been in deep freeze for weeks. If you go into your modern supermarket, everything looks like it was just picked yesterday, which doesn't make sense when you're thinking of huge supermarket chains. The big supermarket chains have big depots where they keep stuff for weeks. A lot of this stuff is deep frozen, which means a lot of the active nutrients have been killed off. Even stuff like fruit juice, orange juice, often it's being deep frozen and then they just thaw back out again. So a lot of that food, even the fruit, even the vegetables are questioned. Even the organic fruit and vegetables are questionable. And of course, non-organic will have a lot of pesticides and so on. But even organic, is it really organic? Unless you can go to the farm and take a look, it's hard to know. So it is difficult to eat really healthy food. The other thing is, a lot of people have very bad habits. For example, I come from Western Europe, I come from Ireland. And habitually we eat bucket loads of bread, potatoes and cheese. So every day, and it'll be white starchy bread and like lots of it, you know, like for lunch, big baguettes, often sandwiches, like, you know, might end up eating half a loaf of bread in a day or more. Often for lunch having big lumps of toasted brown bread with jam, or brown bread with big lumps of cheddar cheese. So, and of course we have a lot of meals of potatoes. So we're eating huge amounts of potatoes, huge amounts of cheese, huge amount of often white starchy bread. So there's a lot of starchy carbohydrates in there. And that's true of most people in Western countries. We tend to be very fond of breads, and nothing wrong with potatoes, but again, they are starchy, and it's you know, you're getting a lot of the same food stuff all the time. As for the bread, a lot of bread ain't so good. Even if you find a multigrain bread, often it isn't as good as you think. If you really want the healthy bread, you should probably bake your own bread at home, which is difficult for a lot of us to do. Same in Asian countries, they're more likely to use rice, for example, and they eat a huge amount of rice. But again, that's not so good, because the modern rice is a highly polished rice, which isn't very good for health. Years ago, the original rice was a dark yellowishy brown colour, had a dark husk on the outside of the rice, and it was very healthy. But now they've kind of thrown away that outer husk. The type they use is a quick grown rice, and it's highly polished. It's like processed sugar. It's not as good as you think it is. Now, a big reason for food quality problems, so that one is lifestyle. We've gotten into a habit of eating too much food. There's a couple of things, two things there. First of all, regarding the quality of food. After World War II, there was a population boom, and people worried about starvation and people starving. So there's a big increase in the industry of fertilizers and producing a lot of food quickly, which was good for a while, but turns out that it makes the food kind of toxic. Another factor along the way to develop in supermarkets was business people realizing that if I can make something look like it's really good and fresh, people buy it, and a tendency of making things look a certain way. For example, I live in India and we drink raw milk. Raw milk doesn't really look like the milk you get in the carton. The milk you get in the carton or the bottle looks really white. The raw milk is more of a watery white colour, because it hasn't had any chemicals or anything put into it to make it look that way. So a lot of the fruit and veg and food you're eating are designed to look a certain way, and also they're willing to sell them out of season. So like one of the things, if you're buying say a fruit or veg and it either doesn't come from your country or it's out of season, chances are it has been shipped, possibly deep frozen, as an example. So we've got a mixture of a necessity because of the population growth, plus business people trying to cash in on it. So that's one big aspect of why the food quality isn't good. Another aspect, of course, is that we've gotten used to eating a lot of junky foods. But then another aspect as well is that if you go back to, you know, 4 or 5 generations ago, 1920s, 30s, etc., a lot of people's either grandparents or great-grandparents, a lot of people worked on the farm or did some kind of physical labour. And if you're a labourer on a farm, you might eat a lot of big meals and eat 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day. But if you're working doing physical strenuous work for 8 or 9 hours a day, you can eat that amount of calories and it will just burn off. But nowadays we're sitting watching a TV, we're playing with our phones, we're sitting in our office. You know, the average person now needs somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 calories. They don't need 5,000 or 6,000 calories. So we got into a habit as well of eating a lot of starchy, high carbohydrate food. Nothing wrong with carbs, but too many is bad. And like I said, a lot of processed, pre-packaged foods, which are junk. So there's a whole variety of reasons. That's what I would feel would be the main one. You've got things like lifestyle, of course, and you've got genetics, and you've got stress, but a big part of it is the food chain. Foods start with the type of foods we're eating and how they're processed. And what happens is, over time, the stomach and the intestines start malfunctioning, and then it causes problems whereby maybe the stomach isn't breaking the food down properly, maybe the intestines can't absorb certain type of foods. Things like the body can't deal with a blockage, you get constipation. If it suddenly evacuates the blockage, you get diarrhea. If there's a food sensitivity or an acid regularity problem in your stomach, you might get stomach acidity and so on. So there's so many things. It's very complex, but what are we going to do about it? Well, if you want, and this we're going to talk about in the next video, if you want to cure or radically improve your gut health issues, you have to detox, rebalance, and rebuild. Detoxing means you have to get the toxins out. Okay, rebuilding, rebalancing is getting the balance going, and then we have to rebuilding. So tune into the next video, and we'll take a look at the strategies and supplements that you can use to help you improve your digestion today. See you in the next video.